Hi everyone, welcome to another DBT video, and this time we're going to be discussing about DBT documentation. Now I'm really excited about this one because documentation is one of those topics where everybody knows that we should care about it, we should do this properly, but there are very few projects which actually implement this really well. So I thought I will take this opportunity to help describe some of the best practices that you can use in DBT documentation. If you're new here, then I'm Radhika and this is my YouTube channel DataZard. If you haven't subscribed already and would want to know more about DBT, then please do subscribe to the channel as I don't want you to miss out on this particular series upcoming videos. If you have any questions, comments or any feedback, please put that in the comment section below. I promise I will get back to you. And now without further ado, let's get started. If you are a data professional, then think about a data project that you handled and what were the difficulties that you faced. Like, for example, when you looked at a model, did you know that what it is used for? What are the primary keys? What are the columns? What do they mean, etc.? Did you struggle with that? If you are new into the data world, then consider this particular project which we are building in this series. If I had given you this particular project and asked you to do data analysis on top of this or add something on top of this or maybe just understand this particular project, then would you know that what silver employee enriched is, what gold attrition scoring or the different models that we have created are, or the different columns that we have created, what they are, unless we have proper documentation? I am sure everybody's answer would be no. It's really hard without getting a proper documentation. So this is why it's super crucial that we have enough documentation so that the stakeholders who are accessing the data, they understand what each model means, where they should be using which model, what are the columns, etc. And this is exactly what DBT documentation is all about. Now you must be having question that where does the documentation live in DBT? So there are two places where you can add documentation in DBT. The first one is YAML files. So in YAML files, these files could be like source.yaml, it could be your properties.yaml, it could be your models.yaml. You could have named these files differently. It could be your schema.yaml. Whatever you have named this file, the extension is always YAML, like YML. So these are the files where you can write your descriptions. And in this file, we usually write descriptions as description, like there is a field called as description in this YAML where we give the description, and these could be descriptions for our models, for our columns, anything like that. The second place where you can write documentation is the markdown files. Now we have not written any markdown files till now, but they always have an extension of MD standing for markdown. So in this file we write longer, very richer descriptions using doc blocks. So here we're going to use something called as doc blocks. Don't worry if you don't understand what these doc blocks are. I'm going to cover this in detail in the upcoming video. If you have to write shorter inline descriptions, then YAML file is the place. And if you want to write descriptive long descriptions, like very rich descriptions, then markdown files are the place to write it. I'll just review our DBT project. So if you see here, we have written macros. In this we have properties.yaml file. Then we have got models where we have YAML file for each of these gold, silver and bronze layers. Then we have got seeds, and here also we have added this seeds underscore properties.yaml file. While I was building this particular DBT project, I was writing documentation. Now for the documentation that I have added till now, it is the basic documentation, like there are best practices and all of those things which I'm going to cover in this particular video. That's why I was just writing things in very basic manner just to cover the contents, but here we are going to be discussing about documentation in detail and getting to know about the best practices as well, which I'm going to implement in the project as well. Let us start with how to document models and columns. We have already seen this multiple times in our different layers. So what we were doing was we were creating a YAML file, and in this YAML file we were providing description for both models as well as for columns. Now in this YAML file we have a property called as description, and we were adding this property to models, we were adding this property to columns to provide the description for these models and columns. So if I go back to our DBT project and go to bronze model.yaml, you can see that this is our model and then this is the description. Then these are our columns and we have got descriptions for our columns. Let me just remove this. So you can see that we have got this description property that we are using across all of this YAML file. So we have got models and columns covered. Now this is not following the best practices of how to write description for models. The best practice says that when you're writing description for model, the first line should always explain the grain of the model. Now what does grain of the model mean? Grain means what's the lowest granularity. Let us take an example where you are working in an e-commerce platform and you have orders data. So this orders data will have granularity of order ID. Each row will represent one order. Similarly, if you have data about customers, then the granularity is customer level. In orders table, you still have information about customers in it, but the granularity is order. Each row will represent one order and there could be multiple orders from one customer. Similarly, for our data, in the bronze HR data, each row represents employee, one employee. It is a unique employee. So that is why we should be writing grain over here. So what I can say over here is one row per employee, and then I can add this description. Now, if you have to add these things in multiple lines, then what you can do is you can just add it over here by adding a greater than sign. So after this greater than sign, you can just split it into multiple rows for providing this description. So always remember that when you start description for a model, it should always start with one row per whatever that granularity is. This will help the reader to understand that what this model represents. Now from this, the reader would know, or the stakeholder will know, that this is about employees. Each row represents a unique employee, and they can understand how they can safely join this particular model with some other models because they understand what should be the join condition, because we have told them the granularity of our model. Similarly, for columns also, the best practice is we should not just document primary keys, but document everything that is important. For example, here we are also documenting what is business travel, daily rate, department, all of these things, because it gives a clear picture to the stakeholder as to what this column represents. We are showing what each column can have, like what values each column can hold. This shows the reader what they can expect, and if they see these things, they can know that, okay, this is how I'm going to join, this is how I'm going to query, this is how I'm going to filter. So it gives that stakeholder understanding and helps in self-serving capabilities. Now, some of the best practices for writing documentation are, if you're writing about a model, like I said, you should always mention the grain of the model. If you're writing about columns, then along with the column descriptions, you should also mention if this is excluding anything or what are the edge cases. For example, you could write that this does not include test accounts or there can be nulls. So you are making sure that the stakeholder understands what are the edge cases. Then when you're writing for somebody else. So you should understand who you're writing for and write accordingly. Your audience needs to understand what you are writing, so avoid jargons where you can. If you're writing for business analysts or some executives, instead of writing some technical jargon, exclude them and write in simple language as to what that model means, what that column means, etc. Always try to document enums where you can. For example, in our case, there was this business travel, which involved travel rarely, travel frequently, non travel. So, we are providing this information proactively to the stakeholder. They don't have to query this model and then understand what are the different or distinct business travels that are available. We're just outrightly telling them this is what's available, so they don't have to query this. And lastly, I want to say that don't aim for perfection. 60% of something is infinitely better than 0% of no documentation. So start with something and then you can improve on in the next iterations or in the time to come. Always start with whichever is your most used model, whichever the stakeholders are going to query the most. Start with that because that is the thing which you want to put it out there in front of stakeholders, and then you can expand outwards from there whenever you have some time. In real life, we don't get to document every model, document every column. So we just have to choose which ones are the best to document. But I would encourage to document as much as you can because it helps you and the stakeholders for self-service. Now, we have got our models documented, we have got our columns documented, which is great. But where is our raw data actually coming from? This we haven't talked about documenting yet in this particular conversation. And if you have watched this series, then you know that this can be documented in our sources, because our sources is the place where we are telling DBT where the source is, what the source is, where the data is coming from. So sources, they have the raw tables which are going to land into your warehouse from some operational system. Now, this operational system could be your CRM, it could be your payment platform, it could be your transactional database, it could just be your product database, some analytics space, it could be anything. So we should be documenting this to let the stakeholders know where this data is coming from if they ever want to know about it, how fresh is the data, and there is a lot more thing that you can add which you're going to document in your sources. So we have already previously discussed this, that if you want to document sources, then this is going to live into your sources.yaml file. So if I go into our sources, let me close these. And in models, we have this bronze_source.yaml file. So this is where we are documenting the source. I have already covered a few of these properties, like we are documenting which database it is, which schema it is, which table it is, and the columns that we are bringing in. So this is the basic information, but we can add a lot of other information. So if we go to DBT's documentation, so in this page you can see that this page has listed source properties. So apart from the information like database and schema, we can write about loader. So what this means is, how are we loading this? So in our use case, what I can say is we are loading this using S3 and Snowflake stage. So what I'm going to do is, in here, I'm going to add property loader, and I'm going to say this is S3 stage Snowflake, because this is exactly what we have created. You could be getting data from different tools, like it could be Stitch, Fivetran, or any other tool. So you can write that as the loader. Now this is just a text field. It does not have any validation or anything. It's just to inform that how are you getting that data. Some of the important things like data freshness, how fresh is the data? Has it been 2 hours, 3 hours since the data has been loaded into the data warehouse, so that the stakeholder can understand the gap? This can be understood using this. You have the warn after, error after, all of these properties. You can add meta information, you can add some tags to the sources. So these are the things which you can add. I'm not going to go into the details right now in this particular video because I want this to be focused around documentation, not what each properties in these YAML files mean. But I promise I'll make a separate video on each of these properties explaining them in detail. So please watch this space. But for now, this is what you can do with your sources. Now, there is one more reason as to why we should be documenting our sources, and that's because it matters for lineage. So when we have documented our sources, that like we have sources.yaml file, whatever you want to call it, but you have defined your sources in that YAML file, these are going to show up as your starting nodes in your lineage graph. And this will help you to understand the impact. So you can do the impact analysis. If you're going to change something, how that is going to flow through downstream. This you can do with the help of lineage. So if you don't know what a lineage graph is, let's go to our DBT project. And in here, because I have DBT for power users extension, I'm just going to go to my terminal and show you the lineage from here. So you can see that this is our bronze config threshold model, which is going into stage config threshold. So these are both models. And how do I know these are models? Because it is written MDL, which is for model. And for this bronze config threshold, where the data is coming from, this is written using here. Like this is shown using this SRC mean source, which is config threshold, which we have defined in this bronze underscore source.yaml file. So you see here table config thresholds, and we have defined it over here. So we are able to see the full data flow starting from raw data, where it is coming from, where it is ending up, so that we can understand that if we make a change over here, these two models will be affected. If we make a change over here, this model will get affected. So we can understand the impact and can make changes effectively. So this is why it is important to document your sources as well. So as best practice for source, I would say that document at least the top level sources and the critical columns. You don't have to document every metadata or every small column. Think about the columns that your stakeholder is going to query. They're going to want to know about what this column means, what this model means, or what this table means, what's the raw data coming from. So just try to document those first, and then we can think about the other ones later. So focus on what is important to stakeholder, document that. That's the best practice I can explain about sources documentation. Now let us talk about documenting macros. Most of the times, the documentation that happens, it happens around models and columns, but macros are equally important area that I believe should be documented, because a lot of complex logic lives inside macros. And if somebody else is coming to your project, or there is a new hire which is looking into your project, they should be able to understand what that macro does, and documentation plays a very important role when it comes to that. And that's why you should always document macros. Now, we have also done our documentation for macros. So going back into our DBT project, we have this macros folder, and in here we have created this properties.yaml file and have included a few properties like name, description, and arguments. So you can create any YAML file in this macros folder, which will serve the purpose of adding documentation about these macros. And if you want to get more information, then you can go to DBT's documentation, and here you can see all of the things that you can document related to macros. There is a properties file provided over here, which gives you all the properties, their descriptions, what are they useful for, and some examples as well. So you should be able to refer to this documentation. Don't worry, I will be creating a video on this as well in the upcoming weeks. The only thing that I would like to highlight here is we should just not be documenting like what this macro is doing. We should also be adding if there are any edge cases to consider, if there is any type expectations, any null value expectations or handling that is being done. So anything which is like a gotcha for anybody else who's coming to this place for the first time, like looking at a macro for the first time, all those gotchas, they should be documented, which is the gold standard for a documentation. So this is going to save the next person who's coming into your project. It will help them save a few hours of time debugging the project. This was about macros. Now let us move on to documenting our seeds. Now again, when it comes to documenting seeds, you can create a YAML file in the seeds folder. So going back to our DBT project, here we have got our seeds and we have created this seeds underscore properties.yaml file. You can name this file anything, it really doesn't matter. The extension matters, like this file should be a YAML file, and as long as it is in the seeds folder, this will serve the purpose of being the seeds documentation. And here also we have included a few properties like name, description, columns, their descriptions, etc. You can add a lot of other things as well. So again, please refer to DBT's documentation, like their like the DBT website, for the documentation on what you can do about seeds. So in this particular video, we have covered how to document models, columns for those models, how to document sources, macros, and seeds. We have seen these in depth. In my next video, I'm going to be talking about dbt doc blocks. dbt docs generate and dbt docs serve these two commands, and manifest.json and catalog.json, these two files. And using these commands, we are going to serve our dbt documentation as a website. So this is what we are going to do in our next video. Please let me know how you have found this particular video. If you have any feedback for me or any suggestions for me, then please put them in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.